The shovel trembled in Elena's hands as she carved another chunk of earth from the deepening hole. Each scoop felt like digging through her own chest, extracting pieces of her heart that had already stopped beating months ago. The cemetery was empty at this hour, just past midnight, with only the skeletal branches of oak trees bearing witness to her methodical destruction. She had chosen this spot carefully next to her mother's grave, where she'd promised to be strong, to carry on the family name, to make something of herself. Instead, she'd spent the last 3 years watching her life crumble like autumn leaves. The medical bills had devoured her savings after her mother's cancer battle. The foreclosure notice sat crumpled in her car. Her fiancé had left with another woman, taking her trust fund and her ability to believe in love. The hole was nearly deep enough now, deep enough to bury everything she'd failed to become. Elena's tears mixed with the dirt on her face as she threw the shovel aside and collapsed to her knees. The cold earth felt welcoming against her palms, more comforting than any bed she'd slept in since losing everything that mattered. "You know," a voice said from behind her, smooth and oddly warm in the frigid air. "Most people dig graves for other people, not themselves." Elena's head snapped up. A man stood about 10 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching her with an expression that held no judgment, only curiosity. He was tall, with dark hair that caught the moonlight, and eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. "Go away," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and the cold. "You don't understand. I understand more than you think." He stepped closer, and she could see the kindness in his face, the way his features softened when he looked at her. "I understand that you're trying to bury pain that feels too big for your body. I understand that you think this hole will somehow contain all the hurt you're carrying." Elena's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the grave. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're Elena Vasquez. I know you lost your mother too. Cancer 18 months ago. I know you've been fighting to save your family's house. And I know Marcus Thompson broke your heart and cleaned out your accounts before disappearing with his secretary." The stranger's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "I know because I've been watching you fight for months, and I couldn't stand to watch you give up now." "Who are you?" Elena's voice cracked. "Someone who believes you deserve better than this ending." He extended his hand toward her. "My name is Gabriel, and I'm here to tell you that whatever you're trying to bury tonight, it doesn't have to stay buried. Not if you don't want it to." Elena stared at his outstretched hand, wondering if she was hallucinating from exhaustion and grief. But his presence felt real, solid, like an anchor in the storm that had been her life. "Not today," Gabriel said softly. "You don't have to do this today." Elena's fingers hovered inches from Gabriel's hand, trembling with the weight of a decision that felt too heavy for her broken spirit. The grave yawned beneath her like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole, but something in Gabriel's voice made her pause. "How do you know all that about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel's smile was sad but understanding. "Because I've been where you are. Not literally digging a grave, but standing at the edge of giving up, convinced that the pain would never end." He kept his hand extended, patient as stone. "And because I've been watching you for 3 months, trying to find the courage to talk to you." "Watching me?" Elena pulled back slightly, suspicion creeping into her exhaustion. "I own the coffee shop across from the courthouse, Millfield's Cafe. You've been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday, sitting in the corner booth, fighting phone calls with insurance companies and lawyers. You always order black coffee and never finish it. You always leave a $5 tip, even when you can barely afford the coffee." Elena's heart stuttered. She remembered the coffee shop, remembered the warmth of it when everything else felt cold. But she'd never noticed anyone paying attention to her personal disasters. "I watched you cry after every phone call," Gabriel continued, his voice growing softer. "I watched you give your last $20 to that homeless veteran outside the courthouse. I watched you visit your mother's grave every Sunday, talking to her like she could still hear you. And I watched you grow thinner and more tired each week, like you were disappearing a little more every day. Then you know I have nothing left," Elena said, her voice breaking. "No house, no money, no family. No reason to keep pretending everything will be okay. You have something you don't even see." Gabriel crouched down so he was at her eye level. "You have a heart that gives $5 tips when you're broke. You have compassion that stops for strangers on the street. You have love that visits graves and speaks to the dead. You have strength that kept you fighting for 18 months after losing everything." Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Strength? I'm literally digging my own grave." "No," Gabriel said firmly. "You're excavating pain. You're trying to bury the hurt so deep that it can't touch you anymore. But that's not how healing works. The pain doesn't disappear when you bury it. It just rots underground until it poisons everything above it. He stood up and walked around to the other side of the grave, never breaking eye contact with her. I lost my wife and daughter in a car accident 2 years ago. Drunk driver. I spent 6 months planning my exit from this world, convinced that joining them was the only way to stop the agony. Elena's breath caught. What changed? A stranger pulled me back from the edge. Literally. I was standing on the bridge over Miller's Creek, ready to jump, when this elderly woman walked up and asked if I could help her change a flat tire. She was lying. Her tire was fine. But she saw what I was about to do, and she refused to let me do it alone. Gabriel's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "The dead don't need you to join them. They need you to live the life they can't." She was right. My wife and daughter didn't need me to die. They needed me to honor their memory by living. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, like a locked door creaking open for the first time in months. "So I'm asking you," Gabriel said, extending his hand again. "Will you let me help you climb out of this hole? Will you let me show you that there's still life worth living on the other side of this pain?" Elena stared at Gabriel's outstretched hand for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings about strangers in cemeteries, about trusting someone she'd never really met. But a deeper part of her, the part that had been slowly suffocating under layers of grief and disappointment, recognized something genuine in his eyes. "I don't know how to climb out," she admitted, her voice so small it was almost lost in the wind. "I don't remember how to be anything other than broken." "You don't have to remember," Gabriel said gently. "You just have to take the first step. Everything else, we figure out as we go." Elena looked down at the grave she'd dug, at the dark earth that had seemed so welcoming moments ago. Now it looked like what it was, a hole in the ground, cold and empty. She thought about her mother, about what she would say if she could see her daughter now. Rosa Vasquez had fought cancer with fierce determination, never giving up even when the treatments made her sick enough to wish for death. She'd made Elena promise to live, to find joy, to build something beautiful from the ashes of loss. "My mother would be ashamed of me," Elena whispered. "Your mother would understand," Gabriel replied. "Grief makes us do things we never imagined. But she'd also want you to fight. She'd want you to climb out of this hole and find your way back to the light." Elena's hand shook as she reached toward Gabriel's. Their fingers touched, and she felt the warmth of human connection for the first time in months. His grip was steady, strong enough to hold her, but gentle enough that she knew she could let go if she needed to. "I don't even know where to start," she said as he began to help her up from the edge of the grave. "We start with getting you somewhere warm," Gabriel said, pulling her to her feet. "Then we start with the basics. Food, sleep, a safe place to think clearly." Elena's legs felt shaky. As she stood on solid ground, the world seemed different from this angle, less like a place of endings and more like a place of possibilities. Gabriel bent down and picked up her shovel, then began methodically filling in the grave she'd dug. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making sure you don't have an easy way back down," he said with a small smile. "Recovery isn't linear. There will be days when this hole will look tempting again. I'm not going to make it easy for you to fall back into old patterns." Elena watched him work, struck by the matter-of-fact way he approached what felt like the most dramatic moment of her life. He wasn't treating her like a fragile victim or a tragic case study. He was treating her like someone who had simply lost her way and needed help finding the path forward. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Gabriel paused in his shoveling. "Because 2 years ago, I stood where you're standing now. Because Mrs. Chen didn't walk away when she saw me on that bridge. Because sometimes the universe sends us exactly the person we need, exactly when we need them. Mrs. Chen, the woman who saved my life. Turns out she wasn't just passing by that night. She'd lost her husband to suicide 10 years earlier, and she'd been walking that bridge every night for months, looking for people like me. People like us." Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest. Something that had been cold and tight for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Hope, tiny and fragile, but undeniably present. "So you're paying it forward," she said. "We're paying it forward," Gabriel corrected, tossing another shovelful of earth. "This isn't about me saving you. This is about us helping each other find reasons to keep going." When the grave was filled, Gabriel stuck the shovel in the ground like a marker. "There. Now if you want to dig another hole, you'll have to work for it." Elena almost smiled. "Almost what happens now?" Now, Gabriel said, taking off his coat and draping it around her shoulders. We get you somewhere warm, and we start the slow work of rebuilding a life worth living. Gabriel's coat smelled like coffee and cedar, wrapping Alina in a cocoon of warmth she hadn't realized she'd been craving. As they walked through the cemetery toward the entrance, she found herself studying him in the pale moonlight. He moved with quiet confidence, like someone who'd made peace with his own darkness and found a way to carry it without being crushed by its weight. Your coffee shop, she said, breaking the silence. Millfield's Calf. I remember now. You always wore that blue apron. You noticed me. Gabriel seemed genuinely surprised. I noticed that you never tried to rush me out, even when I sat there for hours. And you never asked questions about why I was crying. Alina pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders. Most people either pretend not to see pain or they want to fix it immediately. You just let me exist in it. Sometimes that's all someone needs. Permission to feel without judgment. They reached his car, a well-worn Honda that had seen better years but was clean and maintained. Gabriel opened the passenger door for her, and Alina hesitated. I don't want to be a burden, she said. I don't want to be someone's charity case. You're not, Gabriel said simply. You're someone who needs help, and I'm someone who can give it. That's not charity. That's humanity. Alina slid into the passenger seat, and Gabriel closed the door gently. The interior was warm, with a small cross hanging from the rearview mirror and a photo tucked into the sun visor. When Gabriel got in and started the engine, she caught a glimpse of the photo, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a little girl with pigtails, both smiling at the camera. Your family? She asked softly. Gabriel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but his voice remained steady. Maria and Sophia, my wife and daughter. They were coming home from Sophia's dance recital when the accident happened. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be grateful that you got to see them, even in a photograph. They were the light of my life, and their memory is what keeps me going. As they drove through the quiet streets, Alina felt the weight of the past few hours settling on her shoulders. The grave, the stranger, the impossible kindness of someone who had every reason to be bitter about life, but chose compassion instead. Where are we going? She asked. My apartment. I have a guest room, and tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. But tonight, you need sleep and food and a safe place to process what just happened. Alina's instincts screamed at her to protest, to insist she couldn't impose, to find reasons why this was a bad idea. But her exhausted body and heart overruled her head. She was tired of fighting, tired of pretending she had everything under control. Gabriel's apartment was small but warm, filled with books and plants, and the lingering scent of coffee. The walls were covered with photographs, not just of Maria and Sophia, but of friends, family, moments of joy captured in time. It was the home of someone who understood the importance of remembering happiness. The guest room is just down the hall, Gabriel said, showing her to a simple but comfortable space with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto a small garden. There are clean towels in the bathroom, and I'll make us some food. I'm not hungry, Alina said automatically. When's the last time you ate? Alina tried to remember, and couldn't. I don't know. Yesterday. The day before. Then you're hungry. You just can't feel it anymore. Grief does that sometimes. It disconnects us from our bodies, from our basic needs. While Gabriel made sandwiches in the kitchen, Alina sat on the edge of the guest bed and really looked at herself for the first time in months. Her reflection in the dresser mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. Hollow-eyed, too thin, wearing clothes that hung loose on her frame. She looked like someone who had been disappearing slowly, piece by piece. Gabriel appeared in the doorway with a plate of food and a cup of tea. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and it's nourishing. Alina took the plate with shaking hands. The first bite tasted like hope, like the possibility of feeling human again. She ate slowly, and with each bite, she felt a little more connected to her body, to the present moment. Thank you, she said when she finished. You don't have to thank me, Gabriel replied. Just promise me you'll try to sleep. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out how to put your life back together. Alina nodded, though she wasn't sure she remembered how to sleep without nightmares. But for the first time in months, she was willing to try. Alina woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, and the sound of gentle humming from the kitchen. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, and panic flickered through her chest until the events of the previous night came flooding back. The grave. Gabriel. The first full meal she'd eaten in days. She'd slept without nightmares for the first time in months. her body finally surrendering to exhaustion and safety. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m., and Alina couldn't remember the last time she'd slept past dawn. Gabriel was in the kitchen, moving around with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been cooking for himself for a while. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, offering her a gentle smile. "Good morning. Coffee, please." Elena's voice was still rough with sleep, but she felt more present than she had in weeks. "I slept. I heard no nightmares." "How did you know about the nightmares?" Gabriel poured coffee into 2 mugs, adding cream to hers without asking how she liked it. "Because I had them too. For months after the accident, I couldn't sleep without seeing the crash, without hearing the sounds. Sleep becomes another thing to fear when grief lives in your dreams." Alina accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "What made them stop?" "Time, therapy, and eventually, learning to populate my dreams with good memories, instead of letting the trauma dominate." Gabriel leaned against the counter, his own coffee cradled in his hands. "It's a process. Some nights are better than others." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence, and Alina found herself studying Gabriel's face in the morning light. He had laugh lines around his eyes, suggesting a man who had known joy before tragedy reshaped his world. There was something deeply attractive about his quiet strength, the way he carried pain without letting it make him cruel. "I need to ask you something," Alina said finally. "Last night, you said you'd been watching me for 3 months. That sounds stalkerish." Gabriel's lips quirked in a wry smile. "I was afraid you'd think that. The truth is, I noticed you because you reminded me of myself in those dark months. The way you sat in my cafe, fighting battles on your phone, trying to hold everything together while falling apart inside. I recognized the look because I'd worn it myself. So you decided to follow me to a cemetery. I decided to check on you when you stopped coming to the cafe. I drove by your house and saw the foreclosure notice. I saw you leaving flowers at your mother's grave. And last night, I saw you driving toward the cemetery with a shovel in your back seat." Gabriel's voice grew serious. "I couldn't shake the feeling that you were in danger from yourself." Alina set down her coffee mug, processing this. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're kind to strangers and generous even when you're broke. I know you loved your mother fiercely and you're loyal to the people you care about. I know you're in pain, but you're not weak. Last night wasn't about weakness, it was about being overwhelmed by circumstances beyond your control." "The foreclosure," Alina said quietly. "I get evicted in 2 weeks. Then we have 2 weeks to figure out options." Gabriel's voice was much like problem-solving instead of catastrophizing. "Have you applied for any assistance programs? Looked into bankruptcy protection?" Alina shook her head. "I've been too proud. Too ashamed. I kept thinking I could fix it myself. That I could find a way to save the house, to pay off the medical bills, to make everything like it was before. Before your world changed," Gabriel said gently. "The thing about grief is that it doesn't just mourn the person you lost. It mourns the future you planned, the life you thought you'd have. You're not just missing your mother. You're missing the version of yourself that existed when she was alive." Alina felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know who I am without her. She was my anchor, my compass. Everything I did was to make her proud, to honor the sacrifices she made for me. What would make her proud now?" "Not digging my own grave," Alina said with a bitter laugh. "No," Gabriel agreed, "but getting help would. Fighting for yourself would. Building a life that honors her memory by living it fully, that would make her proud." Alina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know how to start over." "You don't have to start over," Gabriel said, moving to sit across from her at the small kitchen table. "You just have to start again. Different starting point. Same person with the same capacity for love and strength and resilience." "What if I don't have any resilience left?" "Then you borrow mine until yours comes back," Gabriel said simply. "That's what people do for each other. We share strength when someone runs out of their own." Alina looked at this man who had appeared in her darkest hour like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Mrs. Chen taught me that we're all connected. That sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be to help each other survive. You needed someone to pull you up last night. I needed someone to help me remember why I chose to keep living." Gabriel reached across the table and touched her hand briefly. "We're helping each other." Alina felt something shift inside her chest. Again, that tiny spark of hope growing a little brighter. "Okay, where do we start?" "We start with breakfast," Gabriel said, standing up. "Then we make a list of everything that needs to be handled. And then we handle it, one thing at a time." For the first time in months, Alina felt like she might actually survive what had felt like an unsurvivable situation. She wasn't alone anymore. Over the next 3 days, Gabriel's apartment became a war room for Elena's life reconstruction. The kitchen table was covered with papers, legal documents, and color-coded lists that Gabriel had insisted on creating. Elena watched him work with the methodical precision of someone who understood that drowning problems became manageable when broken into smaller pieces. "Okay," Gabriel said, looking up from his laptop. "I found 3 organizations that provide emergency financial assistance for people facing foreclosure. 2 of them specifically help families dealing with medical debt." Elena curled deeper into the corner of his couch, wearing one of his oversized sweatshirts that smelled like safety. "I already tried applying for help. Everyone wants documentation I don't have or income requirements I can't meet." "That's because you were trying to navigate the system while you were falling apart," Gabriel said gently. "There's a difference between applying for help when you're desperate and applying when you have someone helping. You translate the requirements." He'd spent the morning on the phone, his voice calm and professional as he spoke with caseworkers and advocates. Elena had listened to him explain her situation without making her sound pathetic or helpless, focusing on facts and circumstances rather than emotions. "Mrs. Rodriguez from the Community Action Center is coming by this afternoon," Gabriel continued. "She's going to help us put together a comprehensive application and see what options are available." "You don't have to do this," Elena said, for the dozenth time since she'd arrived. "I can't ask you to put your life on hold for a stranger." Gabriel closed his laptop and looked at her seriously. "Alina, I'm going to say this once, and then I don't want to hear you call yourself a stranger again. You are not a stranger. You are a person I care about who needs help. And helping you isn't putting my life on hold, it's giving my life purpose. But your coffee shop is being managed by my assistant manager for a few days. Tom's been wanting more responsibility anyway." Gabriel moved to sit on the couch beside her. "Besides, the cafe is closed on Sundays and Mondays. I'm not abandoning anything to help you." Alina studied his face, looking for signs of resentment or obligation, but found only genuine concern. "I still don't understand why you're doing this, because 18 months ago, I was sitting in a grief counselor's office, and she told me something that changed my perspective on healing. She said that trauma can either make us smaller or it can make us more compassionate. It can close our hearts or it can crack them open to other people's pain." Gabriel's fingers absently traced the edge of a throw pillow. "I had a choice. After Maria and Sophia died, I could let their death be the end of my story, or I could let it be the beginning of a different kind of story, one where their love lives on through how I treat other people. And you chose compassion. I chose to try. Some days are better than others. But helping you these past few days has reminded me that grief doesn't have to be a dead end. It can be a bridge to understanding other people's pain." Alina felt something deep in her chest loosening, like a knot that had been tied so tight for so long that she'd forgotten it was there. "I've been so angry," she whispered. "At God, at the universe, at my mother for dying, at myself for not being strong enough to handle it." "Anger is part of grief," Gabriel said. "It's your heart's way of protesting the unfairness of loss. But anger becomes poisonous when it's the only emotion you allow yourself to feel." "What other emotions am I supposed to feel?" "All of them. Sadness, fear, love, gratitude, hope. The whole spectrum of human experience doesn't stop just because you're grieving." Alina pulled her knees up to her chest. "I don't remember how to feel anything else. That's okay. Emotions are like muscles. They atrophy when you don't use them. But they come back with practice." There was a knock at the door, and Gabriel stood to answer it. Alina heard him greeting someone warmly, and then he returned with a middle-aged Latina woman carrying a briefcase and wearing a kind smile. "Alina, this is Mrs. Rodriguez from the Community Action Center." Mrs. Rodriguez took a seat across from Alina, her demeanor professional but warm. "Gabriel has told me about your situation. I want you to know that what you're going through is not uncommon, and there are resources available to help you stabilize your housing situation." For the next 2 hours, Mrs. Rodriguez walked Alina through applications for emergency assistance, helped her understand her legal rights as a homeowner facing foreclosure, and connected her with a pro bono attorney who specialized in medical debt cases. "The most important thing," Mrs. Rodriguez said, as she prepared to leave, "is that you're not trying to handle this alone anymore." Gabriel was smart to bring in professional help. Sometimes we need advocates who can speak the language of the system. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Alina sat in stunned silence. For the first time in months, she had a plan, a path forward that didn't involve giving up. How do you feel? Gabriel asked. Alina took a deep breath, checking in with herself. Scared, but also, hopeful. Like maybe this isn't impossible after all. It's not impossible, Gabriel said. It's just hard. And there's a difference between hard and impossible. That evening, as they sat on the couch sharing takeout Chinese food, Alina found herself really looking at Gabriel, not just seeing him as her rescuer, but as a man who had chosen to rebuild his life around helping others heal. Gabriel, thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For refusing to let me disappear. Gabriel met her eyes, and Alina saw something there that made her heart skip, not just compassion, but genuine affection. Thank you for letting me help. For trusting me when trust felt impossible. Alina felt herself blushing. Awareness of Gabriel as more than just a kind stranger beginning to bloom in her chest. But she pushed the feeling away. She was too broken, too much of a mess to think about anything beyond survival. Still, as she fell asleep that night, she found herself thinking about the way Gabriel's eyes crinkled when he smiled, and how safe she felt in his presence. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than just getting by. Alina woke on Thursday morning to the sound of Gabriel laughing on the phone in the kitchen. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh, with genuine joy, and the sound made something flutter in her chest that she wasn't ready to name. That's wonderful news, Gabriel was saying. Yes, I'll tell her right away. Thank you so much for everything. Alina appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Gabriel's face lit up when he saw her. That was Mrs. Rodriguez. The Emergency Assistance Program approved your application. They're going to pay 3 months of your mortgage to stop the foreclosure proceedings. Alina's knees went weak. 3 months. 3 months for you to get back on your feet. And there's more. The pro bono attorney reviewed your case and thinks he can get most of your medical debt dismissed under hardship provisions. Alina, you're going to be okay. Alina burst into tears, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief rather than despair. Gabriel crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a hug, and Alina melted into his warmth, letting herself be held by someone who cared about her well-being. I can't believe this is real, she whispered against his shoulder. It's real, Gabriel said, his voice soft near her ear. You're going to be okay. Your mother's house is going to be okay. Alina pulled back to look at him, and something in the air between them shifted. She became aware of how close they were standing, of the way Gabriel's hands rested on her shoulders, of how his eyes had darkened as he looked at her. Gabriel, she said softly, not sure what she meant to say next. No, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel it too. Alina's heart raced. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I'm still so broken. You're not broken, Gabriel said, his thumb tracing gently across her cheek. You're healing. There's a difference. But what if I'm not good for you? What if I'm too much work? Too much baggage? Gabriel's smile was tender. Alina, we're all works in progress. We're all carrying baggage from our past. The question isn't whether you have scars, it's whether you're willing to keep healing, to keep growing. Alina felt herself leaning into his touch, drawn to this man who had seen her at her absolute worst, and chosen to help her find her way back to herself. I don't want to be a rebound. I don't want to be someone you're saving. You're not, Gabriel said firmly. You're someone I'm falling for. Someone who has shown me that my heart isn't as closed off as I thought it was. What about Maria and Sophia? Gabriel's expression grew serious. They will always be part of my story. Their love shaped me, and their memory motivates me to be the best version of myself. But they're gone, Alina, and I'm still here. I'm still capable of love, of building something new while honoring what came before. Alina searched his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty or guilt. Are you sure? I'm sure that these past few days with you have been the first time in 2 years that I've felt truly alive. I'm sure that helping you has helped me remember who I am when I'm not drowning in grief. I'm sure that whatever this is between us, it's real and it's worth exploring. Alina felt her walls crumbling, the protective barriers she'd built around her heart beginning to dissolve. I'm scared. Me too, Gabriel admitted. But I'm more scared of walking away from this than I am of getting hurt again. Alina made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper, when he responded by pulling her closer. The kiss tasted like hope and possibility, like the promise of something beautiful growing from the ashes of their individual tragedies. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Okay, Alina said, her voice shaky. Okay, let's try this. But slow. I need to take this slow. As slow as you need, Gabriel said, pressing his forehead against hers. We have time. Later that day, Alina returned to her mother's house for the first time in weeks. With Gabriel beside her, she walked through the rooms that had felt like a mausoleum, and began to see them as a home again. The medical bills were still stacked on the kitchen table, but now they looked like problems to be solved, rather than insurmountable obstacles. It feels different, Alina said, standing in her mother's bedroom. Less like a shrine, and more like a place where someone lived and loved. Because you're different, Gabriel said. You're not just surviving anymore. You're starting to live. Again, Alina opened her mother's jewelry box and pulled out a simple gold locket. Inside was a photo of her and her mother from her college graduation, both of them smiling broadly at the camera. She would have liked you, Alina said, showing Gabriel the photo. How do you know? Because she always said, the measure of a person isn't what they do when life is easy, but what they do when life gets hard. You chose compassion when you could have chosen bitterness. You chose to help when you could have chosen to hide. She would have respected that. Gabriel studied the photo, then looked at Alina. She raised an incredible daughter. She raised a daughter who forgot how to believe in herself, Alina corrected. But who's learning to remember. As they drove back to Gabriel's apartment that evening, Alina felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation for tomorrow, not because her problems were solved, but because she was no longer facing them alone. Gabriel, yet when I'm ready, when I'm stronger and more stable, I want to help other people the way you helped me. I want to be someone who notices when people are drowning and throws them a lifeline. Gabriel reached over and took her hand. I think that's exactly what your mother would want you to do with your second chance. Alina squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. She was going to be okay. More than okay, she was going to build a life that honored both her mother's memory and her own capacity for resilience. 2 weeks later, Alina stood in the doorway of Gabriel's coffee shop, watching him work behind the counter with the same quiet efficiency she'd observed from her corner booth all those months ago. But now she saw him differently, not as a stranger who showed her kindness, but as the man who had become her anchor in the storm. You're staring, Gabriel said without looking up from the espresso machine, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I'm observing, Alina corrected, stepping into the cafe. There's a difference. The morning rush had died down, leaving only a few customers scattered throughout the warm space. Alina had started coming in every day, not as the broken woman, fighting battles on her phone, but as someone slowly rebuilding her life with purpose and direction. How did the job interview go? Gabriel asked, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to her. Alina accepted the coffee gratefully, noting that he'd started adding a touch of vanilla syrup, her new favorite way to drink it. I got it. Gabriel's face lit up. Alina, that's incredible. Tell me everything. It's just part-time at the community center, helping people navigate social services applications. But it's a start. Alina felt a flutter of pride in her chest. Mrs. Rodriguez recommended me. She said I'd be good at helping people, because I understand what it's like to need help. You're going to be amazing at it, Gabriel said, coming around the counter to wrap her in a hug. You have such a gift for empathy. Alina leaned into his embrace, still marveling at how natural it felt to be held by him. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd been taking things slowly, building a foundation of friendship and trust beneath the growing attraction between them. There's something else, Alina said, pulling back to look at him. I want to start a support group for people dealing with grief and financial crisis at the same time. I know how isolating it can be to feel like you're the only person drowning in both emotional and practical problems. Gabriel's eyes shone with admiration. That's brilliant. Where would you hold it? I was hoping you might let me use the back room here, maybe on Tuesday evenings when you're closed. I know it's a lot to ask, Alina, Gabriel interrupted gently. You don't have to ask permission to use my space for something that matters to you. This is your home too now. Alina's heart skipped. They hadn't talked about the future in concrete terms, but she'd been staying at Gabriel's apartment every night, and her few belongings had gradually found their way into his space. It was starting to feel less like a temporary refuge, and more like a life they were building together. Is it? She asked quietly. My home. Gabriel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. If you want it to be. Before Alina could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and a young woman entered, looking around nervously. She was thin, with hollow eyes that Alina recognized immediately, the look of someone barely holding everything together. Excuse me, the woman said, approaching the counter hesitantly. I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been sitting outside for an hour trying to work up the courage to come in. Someone told me this was a safe place, somewhere I could just exist for a while without being hassled. Alina and Gabriel exchanged a meaningful look. Of course, Gabriel said warmly. Take any seat you'd like. No pressure to order anything if you're not ready. The woman's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. I lost my job last week, and I'm about to lose my apartment, and I don't know what to do next. Alina felt her heart constrict with recognition. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah. I'm Alina, and I want you to know that whatever you're going through, you're not alone. Alina moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. 3 weeks ago, I was in your exact position. I'd lost everything, and I was convinced that giving up was my only option. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. What changed? Alina looked at Gabriel, then back at Sarah. Someone saw me when I couldn't see myself. Someone refused to let me disappear. And then I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. I don't know how to ask for help, Sarah whispered. You just did, Alina said softly. You walked into this coffee shop looking for a safe place. That's asking for help. Alina spent the next hour talking with Sarah, sharing resources and connecting her with Mrs. Rodriguez at the Community Action Center. As she watched Sarah leave with a folder full of information and a phone number for emergency assistance, Alina felt something profound shift inside her. How does it feel? Gabriel asked, watching Sarah walk away with more hope in her posture than when she'd arrived. Like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be, Alina said. Like my mother's death and everything that followed weren't just random tragedies, but part of a bigger story about learning to help people heal. Gabriel pulled her into his arms, and Alina felt the last of her walls crumble. She was no longer the woman who had dug her own grave in silence. She was someone who had been pulled from the darkness and was now committed to pulling others toward the light. I love you, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Gabriel's smile was radiant. I love you too. I've been waiting for you to be ready to hear it. I'm ready, Alina said, and meant it completely. I'm ready for all of it. 6 months later, Alina stood in the back room of Gabriel's cafe, arranging folding chairs in a circle. The Tuesday evening grief support group had grown from 3 people to 12, and tonight they were expecting 2 new members. The walls were covered with photos and thank you notes from people who had found their way back to hope through the community they'd built together. Need help with anything? Gabriel asked, appearing in the doorway with a tray of coffee and tea. Just finishing up, Alina replied, adjusting the last chair. Sarah's bringing her sister tonight, the one who just lost her husband. Gabriel set the tray on the small table they designated for refreshments. And how's Sarah doing? She got promoted to supervisor at the nonprofit where she's working. She's thinking about going back to school for social work. Alina smiled, remembering the hollow-eyed woman who had stumbled into their cafe 6 months ago. She told me last week that she wants to run her own support group someday. The ripple effect, Gabriel said, wrapping his arms around Alina from behind. One person helps another, who helps another, who helps another. Alina leaned back against his chest, still amazed by how natural it felt to be held by him. Their relationship had deepened, slowly but steadily, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of love that grows stronger through weathering difficulties. Together, speaking of ripple effects, Alina said, turning in his arms, I have something to tell you. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Good something or concerning something? Good something. Great something, actually. Alina took a deep breath. The Community Action Center offered me a full-time position. They want me to coordinate all their grief and crisis support programs across 3 counties. Gabriel's face lit up. Alina, that's incredible. You've worked so hard for this. There's more, Alina said, her heart racing. They're funding a new initiative, mobile crisis response teams, that go out to help people in their darkest moments, like you did for me. Gabriel's eyes widened as the implications sank in. You mean? I mean we could formalize what we've been doing. Train other people to recognize the signs, to intervene before someone makes a permanent decision about a temporary crisis. Alina's voice grew excited. They want me to design the program. Gabriel, we could save lives. Alina's cheeks flushed. I was hoping you'd consider being my co-director. I know it would mean changes to the cafe. But Gabriel silenced her with a kiss, deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Yes, he said simply. Yes to the program. Yes to working together. Yes to building something that honors both our stories. Alina felt tears prick her eyes. Are you sure? It's a big change. Alina, 2 years ago, I was planning to end my life. Now I'm planning a future with the woman I love, doing work that gives meaning to every loss I've experienced. I've never been more sure of anything. People began arriving for the support group, and Alina watched Gabriel greet each person with the same warmth and genuine care he'd shown her that night in the cemetery. She saw him notice the small details: who looked particularly tired, who seemed to be struggling more than usual, who might need extra support. As the group session began, Alina found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here, the grave she'd dug in silence, the stranger who had refused to let her disappear, the slow work of rebuilding not just her life but her faith in the possibility of joy after devastation. Alina, Sarah's voice drew her attention back to the group. Would you share what helped you the most in early recovery? Alina looked around the circle, at faces that reflected her own past, pain and present hope. Learning that healing isn't linear, she said. There were days when I thought I was better, and then I'd have a setback and feel like I was back at square one. But Gabriel taught me that setbacks aren't failures, they're just part of the process. She reached for Gabriel's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The other thing that helped was understanding that my pain had a purpose. That everything I went through, losing my mum, the financial crisis, the despair of it, could be transformed into something that helps other people heal. But how do you know when you're ready to help others? Asked Maria, one of the newer members. How do you know when you're strong enough? Alina smiled. You don't wait until you're completely healed to start helping others. You start helping others as part of your healing process. The love you give comes back to you, multiplied. After the group session ended, and the last person had left, Alina and Gabriel cleaned up the back room together, moving in the comfortable synchronicity of two people who had learned to work as a team. I have something for you, Gabriel said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Alina's heart stopped. Gabriel, ... It's not what you think, he said quickly, though his smile suggested otherwise. Well, it is what you think, but not yet. Not until you're ready. Alina opened the box to find a beautiful silver locket, similar to the one she wore with her mother's photo. It's gorgeous, but I don't understand. Gabriel opened the locket, revealing a photo of the two of them from the previous month, laughing together at a community fundraiser. I wanted you to have something that represents our beginning, our choice to build something beautiful together. Alina's eyes filled with tears as she understood the gesture. So when you do propose, ... the ring will represent our future, Gabriel said, fastening the locket around her neck. But this represents our foundation, the love that grew from helping each other heal. Alina kissed him softly, tasting the salt of her own tears. I love you so much, it scares me sometimes. Good scared, or bad scared? Good scared, the kind of scared that means you're about to do something that will change your life forever. Gabriel pulled her close, and Alina felt the complete rightness of being in his arms. They had found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something luminous together. 1 year later, Alina stood in the same cemetery where Gabriel had first found her. But this time she wasn't alone, and she wasn't digging. She was placing fresh flowers on her mother's grave, with Gabriel beside her and a small group of friends and family gathered around them. Hi, Mama, Alina said softly, kneeling beside the headstone. I brought someone special to meet you. Gabriel knelt beside her, placing his own flowers next to hers. Mrs. Vasquez, I promise to love your daughter with the same fierce devotion you showed her. I promise to help her honor your memory by living the fullest life possible. Alina's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy and gratitude rather than grief. I think she approves, she whispered. How can you tell? Alina smiled, looking up at the sky where a butterfly had landed on her mother's headstone. She always said butterflies were angels checking on us. And this one's been following us around all morning. Gabriel stood and helped Alina to her feet, then turned to address the small gathering. Thank you all for being here with us today. Alina wanted to start our new life together by honoring the people who shaped us, including those who can't be here in person. Alina looked around at the faces of the people who had become her chosen family. Sarah was there with her sister, both of them thriving in their new lives. Mrs. Rodriguez had come, along with several members of their support group. Tom from the coffee shop stood next to Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had saved Gabriel's life 2 years ago. A year ago, Alina said, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet cemetery. I came to this place ready to give up. I thought my story was over, that I had nothing left to offer the world. But I was wrong. My story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. She reached for Gabriel's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. I learned that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest soil. That love can bloom, even in the places where we thought nothing could ever grow again. Gabriel smiled at her, his eyes shining with pride and love. Alina taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the past or pretending that loss doesn't matter. It's about integrating our pain into a larger story of hope and resilience. We wanted to get married here, Alina continued. Not because we're obsessed with the past, but because we wanted to acknowledge that every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning. This place where I almost gave up is now the place where I'm choosing to commit to a life of service and love. The ceremony was simple but profound. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to support each other through whatever challenges lay ahead, to use their experiences to help others find their way back to hope. I promise to see you, Alina said, her voice steady, despite her tears, even when you can't see yourself. I promise to pull you back from any edge you might find yourself on, just as you pulled me back from mine. I promise to help you remember who you are, Gabriel replied. On the days when pain makes you forget, I promise to build a life with you that honors both our scars and our dreams. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the butterfly on Elena's mother's headstone took flight, circling them once before disappearing into the blue sky. As they walked back through the cemetery together, Alina felt the profound completion of a journey that had started with despair and ended with hope. She was no longer the woman who had dug her own grave in silence. She was someone who had been pulled from the darkness and had chosen to dedicate her life to pulling others toward the light. Any regrets? Gabriel asked as they reached the cemetery gate. Alina looked back at the place where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. Only that it took me so long to learn that asking for help is the strongest thing you can do. And now we help others learn the same lesson. Alina smiled, thinking about the crisis intervention program they'd launched, the lives they'd already touched, the ripple effects that would continue long after they were gone. We make sure that no one has to dig their own grave in silence. Gabriel lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her wedding ring. Ready to go home, Mrs. Millfield. Elena's heart swelled with joy at the sound of her new name, at the promise of the life stretching out before them. Ready, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they drove away from the cemetery, Elena caught sight of their reflection in the side mirror, two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something luminous together. Behind them, the butterfly reappeared, following their car until they turned onto the main road and began their journey home. The grave she had dug in silence was now filled with flowers, a reminder that sometimes the deepest holes in our lives become the foundation for the most beautiful gardens. And Alina knew that every day, for the rest of her life, she would choose to tend that garden with the man who had refused to let her disappear, who had taught her that love was not just about being saved, but about learning to save others in return. Their story was just beginning, and it was going to be magnificent. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with a meeting of two perfect people, but with two broken souls who choose to heal together, transforming their pain into a beacon of hope for others. This is the true alchemy of love, not the erasure of our scars, but the transformation of our wounds into wisdom, our grief into grace, and our darkness into light that guides others home.